It is difficult, especially if you're non-technical. We've helped rescue projects where the founders like things aren't going great. I mean, the app kind of works. It probably only needs a few weeks of tweaks. And then they're like, we can get you access to the code and we'll take a look at the code. And, it's 4 versions behind of a framework with like super odd architecture and extreme inefficiencies and different things that just kind of blow your mind. Like, wait a minute, when did you build this? This is new.
Yeah.
Um, and they just have no idea.
Well, John, thanks for coming on the show. It's fun to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Elijah. Glad to be here.
Why don't we just kick things off with a little bit about who you are, who's John in this world, what are you up to?
Yeah, well, I am a web and mobile application developer by trade, but before that, I was a musician and an athlete. So um, I kind of found my way to technology through playing with music and wanting to figure out how to record it. My dad was in bands for his career growing up, and my mom was a graphic designer. So we had computers at home, and I learned how to launch Wolfenstein off of a shareware disk from Radio Shack to play that on a 386 and type in WIN enter at the DOS terminal and launch up Windows 3.1. Graduated onto understanding more about networking and wireless and different aspects of how to make the computers talk to each other, which was really interesting to me at the time because we lived in pretty rural Southwest Wisconsin, and I would not have other than talking on the phone for hours. Right, I didn't have a great way to chat with some of my friends after we moved when I was in about 6th grade. And so I bought an old laptop and I'd go visit my friend in the summer and we'd try to figure out how to connect our PowerBooks together before Ethernet with like ADB connections and different Apple Talk stuff. So anyway, got kind of nerdy around music recording and networking, and just kind of turned into a passion for technology as a career.
I feel like one of the one of the trends that I think humanity is obsessed with is connectivity. And I think that a lot of times when you look at technology over time, survival and then also communication. So fire obviously is about survival and food, but paper, the printing press, the internet, a lot of the things that we have built from a technology perspective are about, and you look at the modern app ecosystem. I mean, there's some, most of the most popular apps are like the WhatsApps, the Instagrams, and they're all the TikToks. They're all different ways in which we communicate as humans. What do you think it is about human nature that desires to connect with people so much that we continually invent new ways to do it?
That's a deep question.
Going right in.
I think humans are social by nature. And so if you feel isolated, either physically because there literally aren't people around you, or there aren't people with whom you connect about anything, you're going to try and find ways to reach out and validate your point of view or validate your existence almost, that it's like, am I crazy or are there other people like me in the world? And technology has really shortcut that experience for people, mostly for good. I think in some cases for bad, where you can get validated by some other folks who might share a view or a you know, point of existence that's maybe not the best for humanity long term. And I think it's the things that we do as technologists, bringing products to market, and things that, for example, governments or other people involved in helping set up some of where we will go with technology as a species have a huge responsibility to make sure that we can do things for good and not evil. And AI is the first thing that comes to mind, pivoting from the connection point to good versus evil with technology in my mind lately.
Yeah, I mean, AI and AI ethics is one of the most talked about topics, but I do think we keep talking about it because depending on how you want to slice it, we have invented intelligence, and we've invented intelligence before, but this is the first one that simulates human lifelike intelligence. And then you start talking about the impacts of having technology emulate, simulate, or impersonate human nature. And then you also kind of layer in the aspect of, well, what is consciousness? I don't think anyone's saying that AI is conscious right now. Well, maybe a few are, but it does lead you to, well, when will it become conscious? Will it become conscious? And it's kind of more tied into a foreseeable path rather than this future unknown technology that sure maybe one day. So with AI, what have you been thinking about with that slippery slope of using it for evil versus using it for good, and what makes technology? Do you think technology is inherently one or the other, or is it just a tool and it's the humans behind it that make it one way or another?
I do think it is the tool and the humans involved. I saw a tweet today that's rather apropos. It was around AI isn't going to replace your job. A human with AI is going to replace your job.
Very true.
And so I thought that was pretty relevant. And um, I aligned with that. I think as a developer, right, or someone who used to be a full-time developer and now helps clients understand how to bring a new product to market and what that's going to mean, how long it's going to take, the fidelity of the features. There's all kinds of things for people in positions like mine to use AI for good to help me be more effective in, I guess, narrowing down the amount of time it takes for me to get that detail packaged up in a way that I can communicate, for example, to our clients what options they have to bring a product to market. So whether that's strictly in marketing with things like ChatGPT that can help you generate an outline that you can expand upon, or being able to generate images that are specific to your particular use case that might be a great fit for your slide deck without having to spend an hour and a half searching Google Images or some sort of uh, you know Getty Images affiliated clip art type. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's nice to be able to have those tools right at hand that can sort of give you the answer instead of making you search out the answer. Of course, we need to be a little bit careful with just taking everything at face value from these tools. They hallucinate, if you're not familiar with that, kind of invent things out of thin air based on lots of different data all being processed at the same time. I don't know all the technical details, but uh, it is getting interesting. And I guess back to your point of good versus evil, the content, if you take it from the human trying to help simplify their job to be more effective, and in my case, help a client bring a new idea to market, and you take that into the political spectrum or the news spectrum or any of this generative AI sort of phase that we're entering into, and it's getting more and more difficult to tell reality from fiction.
Yeah. So talk a bit about that dark side, and then also the fact that you were a musician. So I'm sure you've have the musical tendencies and the creative mind. Maybe your palette is now technology rather than music, but art has always been one of the aspects that human nature has had that differentiates versus the rest of the world. We create art to communicate, we create art to express feelings. And this is the first time in the history of our species that we have something else that can create art. Do you think that's good? Do you think that's bad? Where do you think kind of art changes based on AI?
It's a super interesting question because I still dabble with music. I play guitar around the campfire. I have a small home recording studio, and I get into or I enjoy watching people get into debates around, analog hardware versus digital hardware. And is this plugin in Pro Tools as good as, the actual compressor that UA created back in the 50s or whatnot? Um, and so it's funny that even in a digital audio workstation, a DAW that can pipe out to actual hardware, now we're to the point where you don't need the hardware anymore. And to my ear, it sounds just as good, if not better, and is easier. And I think a lot of more musicians are coming around to the fact that you can do things what they call in the box without having to have external hardware. And uh, yet, is artistry lost when you don't have that analog warmth? I don't think so, right? It's still the human that's creating things. And I like techno, I like EDM, I like electronic music as well, right? And classical music. And I was in choirs growing up. That's where I met my wife. And so there's all kinds of aspects of music that I think can be beautiful. And just because a computer helps you make it doesn't, I don't think, detract from that art at all. I think the tricky part is, and where I think some of uh, the folks in Hollywood who are currently striking stand, is that we don't want machines to entirely replace human creativity, though, because even I get worried about like Chat GPT. Now it, initially it couldn't connect to the internet, kind of by design. They didn't either want to unlock that or didn't have the compute power or whatever the case was. It was not it was like, oh, that happened after 2021. We don't have information about that kind of thing. And so if we lived in that world and we started to rely more and more and more on artificial intelligence to create for us, I think all it's doing, unless things are improving with quantum computing and stuff that I can't even fathom yet, I think all it's doing is regurgitating everything we've already done to date.
So you don't think
And
there's
that
net new content coming out of, like, it's just recycled material. It's not actually able to
it's
bring about new.
combinatory, right? It
Yeah.
can it can create recycled things and put them together to make something new, which, I mean, if we've ever heard a new radio hit that was from a song of our youth, we can understand that that is a human thing too, not just a computer thing. And yeah, it's new. I don't know. That's a tricky question to be able to understand if it's truly net new, and is it accidental, or does the computer have taste, right?
Right.
Can
Right.
AI have taste? And maybe it can pull the audience and understand what people just create, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I guess maybe it could develop over time what humans like, but then are we influencing each other, and where does that lead us
I
to?
mean, what do you think? Because I think we all agree that there's an inevitability with technology, right? At some point, technology will be able to do it as long as it's within the confines of physics, right? And so at some point, AI will be able to generate quality music, art, whatever you want, whatever category you want to kind of measure, fully and entirely without humans. And it's going to be on par with 99% or maybe above all humans. So, what does that world look like? Do you think we need to actively resist that? Do you think we need to embrace our overlords? Do you think that there's always, or do you think it's going to approach it, but humans will always be better? Like, what's your stance on that?
I hope that we will continue to evolve. And so as the computers and artificial intelligence mimic what we've done and try to create, maybe we can gain a new thing that's even more expressive. Or, um, I mean, talk about 2D gaming forever, and now we're in VR, right? So that's kind of a leap. And of course, technology is empowering that experience. But like, what other leaps do we not even know about yet that are going to really enhance our experience as humans? I hope we can figure out some more. But if not, should we prevent that from happening? I don't know that you'll be able to, even if you
I think
wanted
that's
to,
yeah, that's
right?
the way of technology.
Um,
You cannot stop it almost. Yeah, it's an interesting time we live in. One thing that I've found myself doing is I've found myself adapting to the technology and changing how I communicate to better use the tool. But it also then has interesting implications. So one of the examples is that I'm always kind of hacking away new products on the side, and I'm also always kind of exploring and staying up to date on new frameworks, new languages, new tools, and given I have fully integrated ChatGPT in terms of my development workflow because it just speeds up and is able to do a lot of heavy lifting for scaffolding things out that you don't need to. I found that if there is something that I want to use that's created after 2021, I often will not use it because it's a lot slower. So I was messing around with Next.js 13, which is kind of fundamentally re-architected in terms of how they do it for server-side rendering. And I found myself building something with it. And then for the next project I built, I went back to Next.js 12 because ChatGPT knows all about 12 but doesn't know about the 13 architecture. So it's interesting to see how we use the tools to get outcomes, but then the tools also have an affect against us.
yeah, it's holding you back while also empowering you at the same time.
Yeah, it's
Almost like a
interesting to
classic
wield.
car, right? It's got more horsepower. Um, not quite as cool, depending on who you are, as a Tesla or something. But yeah, interesting.
It's strange times we live in. One of the things I wanted to jump into, you talked about you're building software for clients, right? And you have this experience from an agency perspective. And before we started the show, you mentioned PWAs and how PWAs are finally at the point of being a more functional technology than they have been for the past 10 years. For those of you who don't know, a PWA is a progressive web app. They The thing that you would most remember them for is in the early days of the App Store, it was any of those websites where they say, go to the website, press the save button, save it to your home screen, and then it's just like an app, but it's not installed through the App Store. That's what a PWA is. So catch me up to date on PWAs. I know you've mentioned that there's a lot of improvements that are happening. How does that affect the future of mobile app or just application development?
Yeah, application development is really interesting. I'm working on a blog post right now that'll hopefully be out in the coming weeks, thinking back about Steve Jobs' original vision for the first iPhone back in 2007. And there was no app store, there was no SDK. You couldn't build a native app as we've come to know them for the iPhone initially. And it's because partially Apple didn't have the infrastructure, and partially the technology wasn't refined enough to allow other people who weren't Apple employees into that ecosystem yet. It was kind of like this scaled back Mac OS that became iOS. And so Steve Jobs has this brilliant idea, whether or not because he was inherently brilliant or because of the constraints, that all apps on iOS, on the original iPhone, could be built with just JavaScript and could be used inside of mobile Safari. And I don't even think PWA was a thing at that point. It was just a mobile website. And there wasn't even really mobile responsive capabilities at that point. His whole thing in the launch of the phone, if I recall correctly, was the entire internet in your pocket. And when you first loaded a web page, it was way zoomed out, but you could see the whole thing. It was pretty cool compared to the BlackBerry or the Palm or anything. At the time, I had some Windows phones that like slid up with a full QWERTY keyboard that I thought were just the coolest thing ever, like the Altel PPC 6700, I think, or something like that.
Did you end up getting a G1 a year or two later, the first Android phone, I think? It's a sliding
Mm-mm.
keyboard, one of the best.
Nope,
Anyway,
no.
nostalgia.
I've
It's a good old
I've
days.
never been I've always been an Apple guy. So
Yeah.
other than those early days, I had the PowerBook 5300, which Tony Hawk also had, and then his battery exploded and started on fire. I remember that's how I remember that one was the one. But yeah, so Steve Jobs said developers can fully embrace this new mobile web by building things in JavaScript and rendering them in Safari. And developers were like, nah, JavaScript isn't what we know it is today. It was 2007. So
This was
it
when
wasn't.
Flash was king and like Flash websites were what everyone was building. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a really great point. He helped kill Flash by not allowing it to work on the iPhone because it would just absolutely decimate a battery. And that was the biggest detractor to, because it required so much compute power to be able to do that. And so JavaScript mobile applications or server rendered web apps just kind of loaded, the full experience loaded. And people got, I think, tired of zooming in and out. And so over time, things kind of progressed a little bit, perhaps pun intended there. And eventually we got the App Store. And as soon as we got the App Store, PWAs died a hard death, or the concept of mobile websites being a thing on the iPhone definitely was not where you needed to be, even if it was potentially detrimental to the end user. You think about the experience early on of having to go to a restaurant and download their app and create an account and all this stuff to be able to see their menu. I mean, now we're back to reality, or like, sanity, which is scan a QR code and see their menu. Whether or not we would have gotten there without COVID, I don't know.
Yeah.
At least to the huge adoption of what it is now. But I almost never see a physical menu anymore. And it just works great because the web is now mobile responsive and it works well. But it's
versus the
been
experience
this
of if you scan the QR code and then you have to go to the app store
to
and
the app
download their app,
store,
and then
download the
maybe they
app.
make you create an account, right? Yeah, very different experience.
Exactly. And their Wi-Fi was probably terrible, and your cell signal probably didn't work great inside their business at the time. So yeah, it's definitely been a very incremental path towards where we are now. But I'm pretty excited that we're almost at the point where if we want to, as a development community and as end users adopting this stuff, we could swing the pendulum back to PWAs being a first class citizen, and not only first class, but possibly um, best in class or like first choice for creating mobile web applications. One of the big detractors of the web versus a true sort of like native mobile app is the inherent need to be connected. Whereas a native mobile app has assets that you download initially when you install the app, and a lot of it typically can be used offline if the developers created it that way, or at least certainly more of that capability you see in apps through the App Store. Whereas mobile responsive websites, if you're not online, you can't see it at all. Well, PWAs have the ability, for those who aren't familiar, to include a service worker and other bits of configuration that will allow them to um, partially function offline. And I think that's where we could really enhance the experience going forward, is creating more capabilities, or at least making it easier for developers to do things like intermittent connectivity, being able to synchronize back to a server once we're connected. And these things are possible, but it's harder right now in a PWA, I think, than it needs to be. And that's where the tooling is a little bit more evolved on the traditional mobile side of things for native mobile apps. So I'd love to see that piece become more refined over time. But as it stands, the majority of us, and even when we talk to clients, are connected almost all the time anyway. And so if that's the case for you and you're looking to launch a new product and you happen to want to serve an audience mobile first, traditionally, if you were going to build a mobile app in the app store, you'd have to say, well, what am I going to do for web? Am I going to also build a web app? Okay, well, now I've got one code base for a web app. I've got one code base or two, depending on if you're going to launch to iOS and Android for those apps. And you need a backend API, right, to serve all three of those clients. And it just gets complicated and time consuming and specialized quickly, which of course leads to more investment. And with a PWA, you can get a lot of that capability, if not all of what you need, typically, as an early stage entrepreneur launching a new idea to try and get traction, with one developer with 8 weeks of
Is
time.
that the biggest, like, if you're pitching me, right, and say I have an idea, I want to build a mobile app for X, right? I want to build some application that does something amazing. I'm going to change the world. That's everyone's entrepreneurial dream. So
Exactly.
if I come to you and I say, "Hey, John, I want to build this thing," what's your argument to say, "Here's where I recommend doing a PWA. This is how you," or I recommend doing a native application. Like, how do you compare that? Is it always price? Is it time to market? Is it all these things? What are the if you steal me on the other side of the argument too, like how do I make a decision between the two options?
Yeah, it is both of those things: price, time to market. I think it's level of complexity of what you're inheriting, because if especially you're hiring a consultancy like my company Headway, we're not going to be your team forever. And so what are we handing off to you as a founder to carry forward into the world? How many people do you have to hire? What do you need to know to hire the right people to not sink your business, right? And then what do those folks have to do in order to communicate with one another to continue to be successful in the long term? I think probably folks have seen that diagram of the number of points of communication between people as your team grows in size. The number of people that need to be notified of all the different changes grows exponentially. So it's difficult to advise a founder who has some pre-seed funding and is testing an idea to go down the path of needing a specialized Android developer, a specialized iOS developer, a full stack or backend specialist that can create an API, and somebody who can build a web application and then tie all that stuff together. So it's definitely the right choice for certain apps and certain use cases, but I'm just excited about that tech kind of hearkening back to the earlier days of more like server rendered, small scrappy teams, building cool things with a team of one or two, to get awesome tech back into the market more quickly and easily.
One of the things that I think is also a big benefit to building PWAs is the fact that you don't have to go through Apple's walled garden or Google's. And so, we had a client a few years back. We worked with them. We kind of talked about the differences between web application versus mobile. They were adamant on mobile. They were adamant on native. And so we built the application, built everything, went well, submitted to the App Store, and Apple denied it. And so we appealed it, and then they denied it again, and then we kind of just went back and forth, and we escalated all the way up, and they fundamentally, because of their initial decision, didn't want to reverse that decision, even though they were incorrect. But it was kind of bureaucracy of, well, we don't want to look stupid and say that we were wrong the first time around. So the higher ups just flat out denied it. And so the client, unfortunately, was in a tough situation. They had spent this money, we had built this application, and the application wasn't able to launch. Fortunately, we had built it in React Native, which is a JavaScript based framework, and we were able to port it to React Native Web, which is basically building a PWA, right? We layered in a lot of PWA functionality, and we were able to ship it. And but that is also a big aspect that you don't think about, is when you have a single point of entry for your company, and it's going through a big monolithic company that they don't really care about you, and you're praying that they approve your application, which for a lot of sectors it's fine. This one was specifically in the health tech space, so it was a little more nuanced in terms of what you are and are not allowed to do, and there's ambiguity. But with a web application, like in the true original vision for the internet, is truly open and truly accessible by anyone. And so it's another kind of feather in PWA's caps. And I'm glad that the functionality is catching up to what it should be for a comparable experience with native applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Even iterating internally before one of our clients is extremely involved in the QA process. If we're deploying to a server for a web application, it's so much easier to deploy it and have the team sort of go get the latest version by just refreshing their browser.
Yeah.
And instead of having to do internal distributions and multiple builds and all these things. And again, it is the right tech in certain circumstances, but I feel like the pendulum swung a little too far towards everybody needs a mobile app, and I'm excited for it to come back. Specifically, also, well, to touch on your point, we've had in the same day, without anything changing, literally, except like one word in the description or something, an app approved and rejected because a different app reviewer picked up the app and tried it
Yep.
out. People are, humans. They're having a good day or a bad day. They do or they don't like your app or the aesthetic or the sector that you're in, the message that the app is conveying, and as impartial as they're supposed to be, we've had apps rejected for seemingly no reason, and then change almost nothing, and submit it again, and it goes through. Um, and that's not trying to game the system. That's just very interesting experiences with various app store reviewers and their interpretation of Apple's own guidelines. But to speak to the App Store guidelines and things that we also kind of help people think through when they're trying to go launch an app is, what's your monetization strategy? If it's not free, is it a subscription? If it's a subscription, are you okay with Apple taking 30% of your revenue? If you're under $1 million and you apply for their program, you could potentially only have to give up 15%, but that's still a lot. And as soon as you cross $1,001, it's immediately 30% again, which I don't quite know how that works. Like, do all of a sudden you just lose money out of your bank? Like, probably not. But it's like all of a sudden I thought we were going to have this revenue, but now we're $1,001, and every other dollar is going to
It's
just
probably tiered like that progressive system, so it's like all the dollars above a million are at the
exactly. Yeah.
30%. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing, and it's not like you're really getting that much value from them. I mean, the internet, you don't really pay for distribution besides hosting and resources you're consuming. But with the App Store, they're not hosting their code on their servers in the sense of kind of rendering it, yes, from the initial download perspective, but there's not really that much value that they're giving you. You're not guaranteed any amount of promotion. I guess maybe there's some discoverability, but the App Store has hundreds of millions of apps, tons and tons of apps. So,
Yeah.
and you have to pay. You just have to pay if you want that. So the the thing that I think is interesting too is the fact that given you are an agency, would you describe yourself as an agency, Headway, or a
Yeah. Digital product
consultancy?
studio. Yeah.
Product studio, yeah, no, it's all product studio. We
There you go.
kindred spirits here. But so as a digital product studio, you don't just ship one product, but you have shipped many, many, many products for many founders and many companies. What are some of those insights that you have for maybe entrepreneurs out there that are building their first product? Maybe they're building in house. Maybe they have a technical co-founder. Maybe they have an agency that's building. What are kind of the do's and don'ts that you have learned along the way of shipping product after product after product? Any general advice you can give?
There's the adage that if you wait till you're happy with your product to ship, you've shipped too late. That might not be the exact quote, but I mean, we see that with every single I don't think we've ever been able to convince someone to actually launch publicly when they are not yet fully happy with their app. And some is more detrimental to the overall sort of winding road that they take to get to full launch than others. Um, but really it's a matter of trust, I think. If you don't trust the team that you brought in to help bring your product to market, you're working with the wrong team. And you need
And
to be
trust
able
meaning
to,
like trusting their advice to say ship early even if you're not happy, like that level of trust.
right, either that or, hey, my cousin's son really thinks this tech is great, we should build it in that. Like, well, we don't have experts in that technology. He might not be wrong, but if you want to work with us, like, we're not going to do that because it'll be to your detriment. And so trusting really all aspects of what we say, and I don't mean like unchecked. Healthy discussion and healthy debate is key in order to allow you to work with a team that's going to get you to the best spot. And so really, I think treating someone, for example, in our case, an agency, a digital product studio that you've hired to help bring your product to market as a co-founder for the time that you're engaged with them. And by that, I mean giving them that same level of respect or like a seat at the table is really important. If you just dictate, hey, here's the feature list, build this, like, yeah, users, I'm not sure. This is my vision. I'm giving you the money. Can't we just build it? You're probably not going to have a good time when you launch the product to market. And we're probably not going to love building it for you. And you're probably going to think we're fighting you along the way. And so to really be effective, I think it takes everybody involved to have a growth mindset, be open to change, understanding what the users want to the point where it helps further your vision. You don't want to let the users design the product for you. You're the innovator, right? You're bringing this new idea to market. But if what you're innovating, they say, I'm not going to use that. I wouldn't pay for that. It's probably worth listening to.
Yeah, user feedback is worth listening to even if you think that you're always right. So I fundamentally agree with you in terms of the trust. I mean, if you don't have trust and really respect for the team that you're working with, then how can you expect them to build and create and manifest the vision that you have? So one of the things that we always do is we kind of take things from a partner perspective of when working with someone, we want to be an active partner. You kind of said treat them like a CTO, they have a seat at the table. How do you find that though? I mean, obviously Matter and Headway are both great companies, but when you are non-technical, you have an idea for a vision, you have an idea for a product, and you need someone, you need someone to build it, right? Whether that's a CTO that's going to build the MVP, or it's your mother's brother's cousin that's going to build it for 3 months and then realize that he can't do it, and then you hire someone else. How do you find the right person to trust? Because I've talked to numerous clients and people in the space, and they trusted the wrong person, and it took them 6 months and $100,000 to learn that they shouldn't trust that person. So, given you're non-technical and you're finding a partner to trust about technical stuff, that's very hard to fact check. how do you find that trust? How do you find someone that's worth your trust?
It's a great question. I've participated in some events locally here in Green Bay, Wisconsin called Tech Connect, which tries to draw an audience of potential technical co-founders so that startups can pitch their idea to try and find somebody who might align with their vision, their values, their strategy, their given current amount of investment. Would you be willing to come in for this amount of equity? Here's how much I can pay in cash. Kind of
So like
pitch
speed
the
dating almost?
yeah, pitch the co-founders in the room. And I was one of the 4 panelists that helped them prepare the pitch, helped them understand what to ask for in a co-founder, and maybe where they should be cautious about, the amount of money you're offering in cash versus equity is probably gonna get this tier of person. Like, is that really gonna be right for your fit? Or, hey, that's actually much more than you would need to give. People are gonna love this idea and want to have it be a part of their story. So I've done some things like that. Um, that doesn't necessarily help the founder trust that technical co-founder until they've worked together for a while. And that's a little bit more of an individualized personal relationship in that particular case. I think for folks, looking to work with a company like Headway or Matter, it's, looking at the kinds of things they've launched before. Do they have experience in your market? And if not, that's maybe a little bit of at least a yellow flag. And if maybe they just don't have a case study, but they have a bunch of private work that they can speak to. Okay, well, then that makes sense. Um, Other than that, what are they willing to risk, right? Do they have a guarantee? Are they willing to put their money where their mouth is? So for us specifically, we have a 50% money back guarantee after working with us for a period of time. If there's, and we don't typically do that for like a 6-week project, but like a 12-week project or more, if it's a significant investment with aligning your launch with a company like Headway, and we're really what's going to make or break your ability to get to market. We want you to feel comfortable that we know we're going to be able to execute. We know we're going to get you where you need to be, unless there's just like some sort of fundamental character difference or ethics type thing that we just no longer align with the founder, um, or they with us, I suppose. But in those cases, we have that money back guarantee that says, look, you're safe here, right? Like you can trust that we're going to be able to work together for the first 6 sprints, really get something tangible in your hands, whether that's web or mobile, and understand what it's like to have us help you talk to the users, to have us help you build your first versions of the app that you can touch and feel, to set up your hosted environment, to negotiate some sort of contract with an external third party that we need to use, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So if I were to distill that down, it's and kind of standardize it, would you say that it's about de-risking yourself when you do enter into a relationship with someone, and then so that would be kind of guarantees or assurances or making sure that the incentives are aligned. But then can you only really learn to trust the person by doing the work? Is there, 6 weeks of kind of doing things together, or is there a way in which you can vet faster or cut bait sooner? Like if you're non-technical, how do you know if you have a good team? Period. Right? Full stop. Do you just have to work with them for 6 months and recognize it's terrible? Or is there another way in which you can kind of vet or pre-screen better upfront?
It is difficult, especially if you're non-technical. I mean, we've helped rescue projects where the founders like, things aren't going great, I don't think. I mean, the app kind of works. It probably only needs a few weeks of kind of tweaks, but I don't know. And then they're like, we can get you access to the code, and we'll take a look at the code, and it's 4 versions behind of a framework with like super odd architecture and extreme inefficiencies and different things that just kind of blow your mind. Like, wait a minute, when did you build this? This is new.
Yeah.
Um, and they just have no idea because it's really difficult if you haven't been doing. I mean, it's the same thing like a junior developer becoming a senior developer. It's not just a number of years, right? It's not like every developer who's been coding for 5 years as a senior developer, they may have been a junior developer 5 years in a row. They may have
Yeah.
done the same thing year after year and not actually grown. And it takes a long time to understand the nuance and the pitfalls and the traps that you can get into with tech. So as a non-technical co-founder, you have no idea. You don't know what you don't know. And I think you need to be willing to take that leap. Like you said, do the work together for a while. But then on the backside, I mean, thinking about some of our clients, even when they're super happy with what we've built, say we're 6 weeks in, we're on target, there aren't a lot of bugs, there's some tweaks they want to make here or there. They still don't know if the code is any good. They just know what their experience is like. So that's an interesting question. I wonder if there would be some sort of way to, um, I don't know, like I'm struggling to find the right word, but gauge the code almost like,
Like an AI code scanner for non-technical people.
sure, yeah, like grade. And there are like, cyclomatic complexity and, number of lines of code in a method. And there are some static analysis things that you can get reports on. But again, that might just be gibberish to a
Right.
non-technical co-founder.
Yeah.
So it's a really great
I,
question. Do you have any thoughts on how to bridge that gap more effectively?
no, I mean, I think you kind of summed it up. Of like, there are certain things in life that are just hard, right? And so, how do you know who to date, right? If you're dating a person and you kind of talk to them, right? And then you talk to them a bit more and you hang out, you spend some time together, and then you might commit for a relationship, right? Commit to a relationship, but you still don't really know them, and you only get to know them through the experience. And even talking to their friends isn't really that helpful, or seeing past people that they dated, right? Like that's not really that helpful. Looking at their LinkedIn, it's helpful in the sense of maybe it gives you some context to kind of know who their friends are and these things, but you don't really know a person until you work with them or you date them or you build something together with them. That being said, I think people are often too afraid to get out of relationships, and this is probably in the dating sense, but also in the hiring a vendor sense of you generally know after a couple weeks you have a gut feeling of where this is going, but you might second guess yourself and say, well, I don't want to have to go back to searching again, and maybe they'll get better. And I don't know, they did do a few things well, so let's just give them a little more time. So I would say that your intuition is generally pretty accurate. So if you're having doubts early on, and you bring them up, and you still have doubts later, a few weeks later, you should probably just abandon ship and get out. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
but it's a
especially if that
very
team
tough
doesn't
thing.
own up to it, right? If they say,
Exactly.
"Oh, no, no,
Exactly.
no, you're wrong, you're mistaken, we would never," that kind of thing, and
Yeah. Excuse
yeah,
making is never a good sign early on in a relationship.
for sure.
I think the only other thing that I've seen be effective is if you are able to find an independent person that can help you be a Sherpa through that, shopping and finding, whether it's a CTO or a co-founder or your first engineer or a dev shop or a product studio. And if you can find someone, and generally finding someone means going to local entrepreneurship meetups and events, and maybe you ask around in your network or post something on social media and say, hey, anyone willing to kind of do a little due diligence on a technical team I might hire and work with. And I think that, or have any recommendations, right? So I think social, going back to kind of the social aspect, social contracts and social referrals are ideal. And if you don't have that, having someone who can maybe help you do a little bit of testing or a little bit of validation on just, are they talking about, uh, doing PHP? And I know there are some PHP enthusiasts that'll hate me for saying this, but are they talking about doing an old school PHP framework or Perl? Maybe we go Perl, versus are they using a more modern framework or modern practices and they know what they're talking about? But yeah,
Yeah,
it's a tough thing to navigate.
definitely.
Speaking of languages and frameworks, I know you're a big Rails guy. So Ruby on Rails was the darling of all startups for what, I guess the early teens or maybe the 2000s, and then it kind of got this this stigma where it's very polarizing, and some people say beautiful monoliths, they scale, it's amazing, absolutely, and other people say, yeah, well, that's kind of like a last year's framework, it's not quite up to snuff. So can you lay out the pros of using Rails, and then also maybe steelman the argument against Rails?
Yeah. So the pros of Rails when it first came out was, and still is, convention over configuration. You didn't have to do a whole bunch of XML setup in order to talk to your database. You didn't have to do a ton of different things to get a decent interaction with the UI around an error message showing up or an input being highlighted yellow, for example. I'm talking 2007 UI here. But that I think is still true today. The thing that's been interesting as technology has grown and companies all need either web or mobile solutions to their problems, or that their customers demand that they do that, whether or not they do that willingly or go kicking and screaming into that build process. I think companies have gotten bigger and technology has brought us together to the point where it can be easy to idolize an Amazon's tech architecture or their frameworks. It can be easy to say, well, Airbnb moved away from React Native, so we could never build in React Native anymore, right? Um, Twitter isn't using Rails anymore because it can't scale. It's like, well, is your app Twitter? Like, it's not. You know what I mean? And if it is, guess how much money they had and abilities they had to solve that small aspect of the bottleneck. And for the longest time, maybe some of the underpinnings had gotten rewritten at Twitter, but their web UI was still Rails for a long time. So I think the ability to build something quick and easy with a small team was the appeal initially. That the developer of one could build substantial applications faster and more effectively than a team of 8 .NET devs, for example, at the time. And there would be fewer bugs, there would be faster iteration. And that was why a lot of startups thought, hey, this is where we need to go because we can almost prototype in code. We don't necessarily have to, and Basecamp still does this. Actually, I just found out last week. DHH, the creator of Rails, who works at 37 Signals, they changed their name to Basecamp for a while. They're back to 37
Oh,
Signals now.
did they revert? That's
Yeah,
funny.
they did. Yeah, because hey, their email application is now also quite popular, and so they couldn't just be, hey, from Basecamp, which is actually an app. So they went back to 37 Signals. But he was talking about, oh, I lost my train of thought.
Talk about just the prototyping in code and through Rails and
Yes,
DHH
yeah.
is doing this.
So DHH the other week I found out has all of their new features, unless they're extremely new UI, prototyped in code. They use Figma very sparingly. He talked about, and
So
they
they
use a
almost
process.
design in code then, right? They're designing
Yeah,
in code.
their designers can write HTML and CSS, and so whether or not that's 100% hooked up to data at that point, I don't know, but they at least design new features in code, which I thought was kind of cool, kind of scary, and works for them, but maybe I wouldn't recommend for everyone. Um, but just the fact that it's fast enough that they could iterate in code. And again, HTML, CSS, ERB or HAML or whatever templating language you would use in the Rails stack, isn't something new. Like they're just using that HTML and CSS to deliver that UI to the end user. So if you keep it simple and you don't necessarily need a ton of NPM packages or a local server to be running or whatever, if you can just build something quickly and easily with core technologies, I think that can be pretty powerful as a starting point. And that's where startups really, I think, got excited about Rails, as they could move quicker because that speed to market and that ability to iterate is extremely valuable to them. Over time, like I said, I think people grew a little bit. And if you had an inefficient query here or there, you might, instead of fixing the problem, look to a new shiny tool like we often do as developers. When something gets a little bit hard, we get distracted and maybe there's an easier way to solve the problem, right? I'm not going to
There's
work out.
always a
I'm
new
just going to
framework.
take this pill. you know? So, so I think part of it is that. Part of it is people just getting bored. Part of it is Rails not being the new exciting thing anymore. Like there's not a lot of cachet and, I'm a Rails developer, um, as much as there used to be. And interestingly, I think when we talk about microservices, stuff like Conway's Law, which if you haven't heard of, let me just read it here. It says the organizations who design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures uh, that they have. So
So
if
therefore,
you're Amazon,
systems defined in an organization match the processes that they have. Yes?
processes or like org chart almost, right? You've got, the shipping team. Let's just talk about Amazon, for example. You got the cart team, right? You've got the search team. You've got the mobile responsive team. You've got the desktop web team, right? Everybody has their little niche in their technology environment there, and they've got a manager who has a boss who has a boss, and that level is talking to one another about how those different teams can integrate with data, and we're going to have this contract ready for you with these endpoints and these uh, fields available in 6 weeks. We guarantee it. So build your UI so it will eventually be able to hook up to that. And people get enamored with some of the problems that organizations are rightfully solving at that scale with a team of two developers. I mean, there's just
Right.
no point in getting that complex. And so I think some of it is the pendulum swinging towards cargo culting, what gets talked about, and it just being a little
So
bit less
basically, kind
popular.
of solve the problem that you have in front of you, and select the tools based on the problems that you have today. And I think one of the things that you touched on it with the Amazon example, you touched on it with the Twitter example of often the things that are most seen, Twitter, Facebook, Uber. I've been told many times, just make it like Uber. You don't recognize that they spent over $1 million on that buttery smooth animation when you launched the app. So when you say just make a little Uber animation, that's also a problem that they had of maybe they wanted to reduce their abandon rate when you launch the app by half a second because that equates to millions of people actually booking the Uber versus not. And so the problems that you are solving as a first startup is, does the concept that I have, the hypothesis that I have, solve pain for someone, solve a problem, and they will use my product. And so whatever gets you to that litmus test fast is effective, because the minute you have it, then you can actually start validating that. And if you validate it and you find some level of product market fit, well, then you can invest more resources and invest more. So that's kind of the pro case for Rails. Steelman, the other side. Why should you not use Rails? Why is it actually a dying language and not to be used?
Ooh, why is it a dying language and not to be used? Um, it's a good question because we have found that some of the clients for whom we recommend Rails say, "Ah, can't do it. We live in San Jose. There aren't Rails developers here." And so if in general something is less popular, by definition, your ability to hire in that technology is somewhat compromised. And I think it's interesting because the same argument is currently being made for Elixir on the other end of it, right? Is like it's not all that new anymore, but Jose Valim made Elixir after having been a very long time Ruby and Rails community member and core team member. Um, he decided he wanted something a little bit different and to solve a little bit different problem, and created his entire new language that sits on top of the Erlang VM, called Elixir. And there's a framework uh, that mimics Rails called Phoenix. And so Ruby on Rails and Elixir and Phoenix are sort of competitors now. Rails is maybe a little bit going like this in terms of popularity, although it does have some resurgences lately with some technologies that they've um, sort of brought to life out of things like the React community and things like the Elixir and Phoenix community.
Stimulus and Hotwire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Phoenix and Elixir, you would think is like kind of on the rise, but it's almost the same problem. It's like, well, it's getting popular, but it's too hard to hire in, even though maybe it's the right fit for your highly concurrent always on application. So it's, I think if you know for sure that you won't be able to hire enough, a big enough team in that technology, whatever the tech is, that's definitely a food for thought and something you should caution. I guess the inverse of that, I would say, is Rails in particular was always so easy to learn because the convention over configuration just made so many decisions for you. And we argue the same thing. We delivered actually a very large um, logistics application for big business over the course of almost 2 years. And we had one Elixir lead developer, and the rest of the team needed to get up to speed on Elixir and Phoenix in order to deliver for that client. And not only did they do that, but the speed at which they learned that functional style of programming and were able to be supported by the community of Elixir and Phoenix developers and tooling that they had at their disposal, uh, they surpassed their speed and their capability of what they had already known in things like Rails or things like React and maybe a Node backend and that kind of thing. So it's it's not something that should be an absolute. If you have talented developers in your area and you need to hire locally, I think training is definitely on the table if it's truly the right technology for your use case.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I think there's value in understanding that you can look at these macro trends of adoption of a language, and I do agree that I think Rails is having a bit of a resurgence in that A, it's still around, B, it's still one of the fastest languages to ship an MVP in, and C, they've started to really make strides on having real-time interactions on the JavaScript side. But to your point, it's about what is the right tool for you, and then also layering in the fact that how much effort goes into learning whatever this tool is. Because yes, there's a function of do you have access to the developers or the resources that you need, but equally, if it's a very easy thing to learn, then it can just kind of be baked into your process of okay, whenever we hire an engineer, we have them train for 6 weeks and then they're up and running. So, and I think Rails, like you said, convention over configuration, it's one of the biggest strengths of Rails.
Yeah, and a lot of frameworks and languages have copied that, which I think is great. I think, the ability for Rails to come in 2004 really kind of defined the narrative of what it meant to be able to build full stack web applications. And some people, I think at the time, were a little bit salty around other people copying Rails. And, we're a nautical themed company here at Headway. So a rising tide lifts all ships, I think. So it works out great, I think, because if you're, especially at a consultancy or a digital product studio like we are, you're never going to only be able to work in that one stack. You have to enjoy the process. You have to enjoy working with other people, bringing new and innovative ideas to market. If the only thing that brings you happy is writing Ruby, or the only thing that brings you happiness is, working in React, like, you're going to have a hard time because technology is changing. And at some point, those won't even be things anymore.
What has that process been like for you? Because you have experience as a CTO of a more traditional tech company, or several, I think, and maybe you want to touch on that. But now you've been the CTO of Headway for 8 years or something. So you've been
Yeah.
not just going deep on one product, but you have many projects and many products that you're overseeing or working in. So talk to me about that decision and that change and why you switched to you jumped ship to keep it nautically themed to the more agency focused, the product studio side of things.
Yeah, well, I originally started in a consultancy. When I first graduated, a good friend of mine had a job at a .NET consultancy in Madison, Wisconsin, and he said, "Hey, you should apply." And I'm like, "I'm not really a very good developer. I don't think this is going to work out."
Said every
I
developer ever, but yes.
I was, I mean, to the point where I had whatever it was, 4.5 years of a college degree at this point. Actually, it was 4. Like, it was like the summer internship, I think is what I was applying for at that point. And I was a management information systems major because I didn't think I was smart enough to be a computer scientist and develop programs. And I didn't want to have to take dip EQ and some of the other math stuff. And it's like, I don't know, I can't, I don't think I can do that. So I went the more management route. I had a minor in business telecommunications. I mentioned earlier that networking's always kind of fascinated me, and it does to this day. So that was kind of a cool aside. But I wanted to give this a shot because a teacher came into college, I think my junior year, and he was new and he didn't know that in the management information systems track at Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where I went, you weren't supposed to build cool software. You were supposed to just build, you know, uh, desktop Windows applications and right click a button and write some code in the code behind. And he taught us how to write Perl on uh, VI on a Linux box and deploy it to Apache. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Because I really wasn't getting into the coding thing in my degree program because it just didn't resonate with me. But when that professor exposed me to just a different style of programming, a more sort of creative, if you will, style of programming that just felt like, hey, I can make anything happen here. I'm not constrained to this box or this operating system or whatever. That was pretty cool. So the web kind of unlocked the development excitement in me, and I went to this interview with the hopes that I could potentially be a developer eventually. But I'm walking around the building going, gosh, I don't even know what's the difference between a method and a function. Like, what's going on? Somehow I got the job, probably large by and large, my friend advocating for me. So nothing's lost on the fact that I had a very soft landing in the world of technology for that first experience. So um, interestingly, I'll get to that point a little bit later around founding Headway. But um, I was a consultant, and the first job I had, I went and said, "Hey, we can probably build that." I was by myself at this large insurance company. They had like $160,000 budget to build this entire web
How stressed
application.
out were you, by the way, being by yourself?
Very,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
That
very.
tracks.
But I'm also a natural like performer, right? And my parents said I should have gone into sales if I wasn't doing technology, so I could still fake it and until I made it. You know what I mean? And I did enjoy the people aspect of things to a degree. It tires me out because I'm kind of like this introverted extrovert. I kind of fall on both sides of that coin. I like it, but it is tiring. And and they said, "Can you build this thing?" And I said, "Yes," because I've done something like that in Rails last year. And I didn't say for my capstone, course. And they're like, "Oh, Rails? Can we build it in that?" And I'm like, "Well, geez, I don't know. I'm at this C#.NET consulting company. I mean, maybe." I hadn't like super fallen in love with Rails to the point where like, okay, this is what I want to base my career on. But I asked my boss and he said, "Sure, yeah, we can build it in that if it's a customer request." And that kind of started my journey of almost like inside entrepreneurship at that company where I got to build the Linux servers that hosted the code. I got to figure out how to use Subversion to move bits around between me and some other developers who I interviewed and helped hire. So I kind of built out this small consulting arm of this company that helped bring products to market with Rails. And that kind of led me along the journey of several larger builds, kind of like that first insurance bill in, the healthcare space, in insurance, and then in fintech actually is where through a couple different consultancies, I got an opportunity to work with a team called Bolster. And they wanted us to build a micro lending platform that would allow the newly approved Jobs Act to have accredited investors make small investments in Main Street businesses to help them expand. And it was a Rails app, and I had two or three other folks with me helping build this, but they really enjoyed working with me and sort of the project management and architecture and oversight that I did. And they asked to hire me on as the CTO. And I'm sure, as you're aware, people working at a product studio, an agency, getting hired on by clients can be okay if you're set up that way, and it can be a big no-no if you're not set up that way. So ultimately, they were able to work that out, and I was excited about the opportunity, to your point earlier, to stop kind of building the same thing over and over again and go really deep in one product. And so that started kind of my 3-year journey in being almost like founding type CTO who had to hire on the first engineering hires, I was still extremely involved in all of the day-to-day coding and architecture and building of that application. And ultimately, that company got acquired for some of the tech that was built to vet the opportunities for the accredited investors. So we were able to make it so that it was so much faster to approve somebody based on certain criteria that KeyBank was interested in acquiring that piece of the technology, and the rest
Qu-
of kind of the micro lending platform
quick sidebar
fell
there. It
away.
just for entrepreneurs out there, it goes to show you that the thing that you set out to build and the vision that you have, something that you build along the way that you think is an artifact might be the real thing that you got acquired for or have your exit on.
Absolutely.
So it's
Yeah.
funny side story. All right, back to the journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, consultancy for a number of years, deep in the product for a number of years, and decided that kind of the startup life and having to commute back and forth to Chicago. They were based out of New York at first, then Chicago. My wife and I wanted to buy a house and start a family, and I decided to kind of step away from that startup opportunity, not look for another sort of founding gig, and went back to consulting actually for a while with a former colleague at a different company, and again was able to build a lot of cool new stuff um, in 8, 12, 16 weeks for companies, and got a taste of that again for a couple of years, and then kind of got that itch back, right? Of oh, maybe I do want to found something. Our we had our first child, we had a house at this point, some security, and it's like,
So let's
well,
introduce lack of security and stability.
yeah, right, exactly. But I was co-working with a couple folks that ended up becoming my co-founders at Headway. We were all working for different companies, but talking every day about how excited we were about technology, talking every day about some of the shortcomings that we had had in jobs, either currently or in the past. And, gosh, I bet we could just do it so much better. Right? The naivety of not having yet fully founded something. And our perhaps lack of experience was the catalyst, as it so often is, to say, we can do this. And we decided to get together and try and provide amazing jobs and great opportunities in technology in Northeast Wisconsin. And the vision was that we were going to be able to leverage, UWGB's computer science program and other interesting, innovative technology companies in the area to kind of draw from a base of developers and build up this community that would elevate technology and entrepreneurship in Northeast Wisconsin. And that was the original vision. We are still working on executing on that, but I am happy to say that it's definitely been trending in the right direction. We now um, host and sponsor and coordinate Startup Week Wisconsin, and try and coordinate and collaborate amongst all the different cities that want to participate in Wisconsin. The same week, a whole series of programming that really gets folks excited about technology and innovation and startups. So we're working slowly towards the vision of being able to bolster not only our community but that of the entire U.S. We're distributed across many states. We're 35 plus people at this point, and probably about 15 of those are the development team, which is who I get to oversee and work with on a day-to-day basis. And transitioning from implementer and sort of individual contributor to management and sales has been interesting, but I really enjoy helping new prospects get to realize their dreams in a lot of cases through technology by setting that initial vision and then having our team be able to execute on it. So I still get to get some of my technology itch and that IC itch through some architecture and through some sometimes free work that we have to do to vet the opportunity, and I'll dig into a new framework or some new piece of software that gets released to see, hey, could this solve that problem more effectively? Could we use this third party integration to cut 2 months of effort off of the build, things like that. So it's exciting to be able to explore some of that vision for where Headway could go from a technical perspective, and get to try and continue to build a company that can offer great jobs.
Being in the vanguard to play with bleeding edge technology is always one of the perks of being more on the sales side. But then I really love the aspect that you kind of tied into of yes, you want to build great products for your clients, but also, and again, I think this is something that we connected and found a lot of alignment on is focusing on the people, right? Your people and helping people have stability in work, in jobs, and help them grow in building more interesting and meaningful technology along the way. I think it's really a beautiful mission. For you specifically, you mentioned transitioning out of, you still do some implementation work, but obviously you're doing it less as the company grows. I'm always curious if, when I talk to engineers, especially engineers that have kind of transitioned to more leadership position, are you hacking away things on the side, or I know you have kids, but are you always kind of building something else? Do you have these passion projects, or is it just kind of all work and then when you're not working, it's home and family?
Yeah, it's definitely home and family for the most part, but when I get time, I do enjoy home automation. And so I'll, get a new light or, some sort of thermostat or something, a camera that can I can tie in and sort of play around with and see what I can script to help talk to other things. And if you can extend across protocols, that's kind of fun. Um,
What's the
I forget.
coolest home automation you've built out so far?
Oh no. Uh,
Maybe most recent, most talked about.
It's pretty vanilla, to be honest. Well, okay, so we we have a cottage, a small cottage that we've been working on renovating for the last year, and I was able to get gig internet up there on this, like, tiny lake, and some for some reason, I thought it would be really smart to put, like, prosumer grade Wi-Fi and PoE Ethernet everywhere, and so I've got this Ubiquity set up in this rack, and it's got Sonos capabilities and Apple HomeKit integration, and several different like Matter smart plugs that I need to yet get integrated through Home Assistant. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to go all Home Assistant or Home Bridge, and like how deep do I want to get into the full custom aspect of things, or should I leave it a little bit more plug and play? But I have a laptop that I'm starting to install Ubuntu on that I'm going to try and use as a home bridge, and then see if I need to go the Home Assistant route or not. But yeah, the ability to do things like detect the humidity and then check to make sure that the doors are locked so that we can turn on the air conditioning for a period of time so that, I don't know, my guitar doesn't crack in half or something. Um,
Pre cool it for the weekend when you're coming up. No, I mean,
yeah,
you
exactly.
clearly have not lost that IT side of things, the information systems and building out the networking side of things. But it's cool to, you clearly also have a passion for that. So maybe that's your side business. You know, if you need a wired home, give John a call and he'll
Yeah.
get you that as well as
I,
building a
I
mobile
have a
app.
friend who does that full time, and I've thought about asking him, "Hey, what custom dev solutions do you need to help further your business?" And just, kind of keep that going for the next 10 years and see at what point it would make sense to team up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. John, if you want to leave the listeners with any final words or thoughts, anything to share?
Boy, I think now is as good a time as ever to try and build something with technology and get your vision realized in the market. You don't need to come to a company like Headway or Matter to try that first step of getting your idea in front of customers. And I saw a really, I think, great message today on LinkedIn that said, founders, if you're looking for a technical co founder, don't just sit back and wait for somebody to solve all of your problems. Go try and talk to customers. Go try and get your product as adopted as you can, even in the lowest possible tech that you can, so that if and when the time comes that you have enough traction, your technical co-founder is jumping on a moving train and really can start to hit the ground running, because that'll make it so much easier and more attractive for somebody to help you realize your vision and bring it to market, and keep your business moving in the meantime.
I could not agree more. Wonderful advice. John, if people want to connect with you and find you online, where should they go?
I'm John, Jon, D as in David, Kinney, Kinney. So John D. Kinney on most platforms. So Twitter or X, GitHub, Instagram, all the things.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Elaine. Appreciate it.